Okay, I'd like to call to order the Berlin-Boylston Regional School Committee. As always, a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and your image and or voice may be broadcast. Do we have any public comments this evening? We did not have any supplied public comments, so we have none from that perspective. I didn't see any hands, so I'll give it one last call for public comments. Hearing none. Okay, we'll move on to the agenda. Okay. Approval of payroll and payable warrants. All good there? Thumbs up for my crew?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We have next item on the agenda is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve our minutes on the consent agenda?
Jim, before we do that, can I ask a question?
Sure. Yep.
As we know, the minutes don't include a significant statement the committee made at the last meeting that I feel when asked what the committee's response is to parents who their kids are suffering through the remote and they need help. The committee's response was to the point of it's tough, we get it, but it is what it is. That's not in the minutes. I think they should be. So that's what I have to say about that.
Okay, I know you had asked me that question, so if you give me one second here. I have a response for you that on mic with the help of Christy. We did some research to be able to address that question for you. So we reached out to MASC and the presser. And the feedback that we got as it relates to that is unless when it relates to a school committee member's public statement, unless a consensus was reached, that would be an official statement and that it comes from the chair, it's not considered an official statement on behalf of the school committee, right? So
yeah, we didn't vote on it. I do believe you consented with it or agreed with it. But I don't want to argue about it. I just want to note that it wasn't included and it was a significant,
sure.
Significant action in my opinion, but I don't want to argue about it.
Sure.
But,
Yep. No, and I don't think we were arguing, but no.
I don't mean argue in the negative, but just, I don't want to have a drawn out discussion about it. I wasn't arguing with you.
Understood. Understood. It's noted. Thank you. We'll make sure that gets noted. So do I have a motion to approve our minutes as presented with Mr. Topman's note as well?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you both. Roll call. Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Mike, was that vote an aye or an nay?
Aye. Yes.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay, that's an aye for me as well. Okay. Thank you all. Let me get back to my agenda here. Moving through. I ran out of ink in my printer, so I couldn't print out my agenda. So I'm using the technical way here. All right, communications. Just a couple from my perspective, at least to start. I wanted to draw everybody's attention as we Christy put our parent email folder. It's not necessarily in each session now because then she'd have to copy and move it. And I think we felt that leaving all those parent communications in there was going to be a positive thing moving forward. So if you look at the root where it lists the years of the different it says 2020, 2021, there's a folder in there now that says parent emails. And that's where those any communications, any emails that get sent to a school committee member or the group of school committee members will work to get in there as well. We talked last week about that email alias parent emails at bbrsd.org. So there were some questions about that this week. Any email that comes there that's for school committee specific, meaning there could be other emails sent there that are more specific to, say, a particular subject or something that's not necessarily school committee related, right? So we can't share every one of those emails, but anything that's school committee related will be copied in there as well. And I've as well, worked with Christy and Jeff, and we're going to do our best to get Jeff's responses to those emails as well put in there, right? So you guys all have that. So everybody has that for their review. So that's kind of where that is. So if anybody is looking for it, that's where it could put. And if anybody wants to move it somewhere else, has a suggestion, I can work with Christy to move it somewhere else as well. If anybody feels like it should be somewhere else. The other communication I just wanted to add is I think I talked a little bit about this in our last meeting. We invited the folks in an effort to continue to build our relationship and early communication, and everybody's working really hard to get budgets not only together for school committee, but as well for the towns. As always, we invited our FinCom folks and our select board leaders or members of the select boards to join us this evening. We did discuss they are going to be allowed to ask questions. I hope, the goal is to keep those questions specific, not really to generate back and forth dialogue, but just questions that can help push things along in an effort to move things forward. We all have a lot to do these days. So, we want to just make sure we're streamlining and being as efficient as possible. For those folks that are in our attendee list, that are those folks from our FinCom and select board, if you could, the way we're going to try to work this tonight is if you have a question, and I see some of you great folks on there, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and Christy and I will be watching it, and we will promote you to panelist when it's time to ask that question. So if we don't see it right away, leave it up there. We'll do our best to make sure, but I'm hoping that'll, generate some real good back and forth and communication, allow us to, work more closely and eliminate some of the back and forth that has to go on behind the scenes, right? That was all I had from a communication perspective. Do we have any other communications from folks on the committee? All right, hearing none. So we'll move into our report section of our agenda, and it's going to be kicked off by Mr. Zangi.
Thank you. Bob, do you have the slides for the?
I do.
You're going to share the screen? So tonight we want to talk about the budget. Let's see, Bob's going to share the screen with us.
Is it displaying yet?
I don't see it.
Hang on a sec. Oh, okay. How about now?
There you go. Okay, so on this first slide, we talk about our budget goals, and the first bullet there to deliver a budget that's within the fiscal means of the towns while meeting the needs of the student. As you know, we presented a 5-year district improvement plan this year, and we were able to get most of the things we wanted to get done, but we recognized that this year is a difficult year, and so we had been talking in the past couple of years to level fund our budget. So this year we were able to do it, and our goal was to stay within increases of 2.5% to 3%, which we were able to do, and at the same time provide those resources that were largely unexpected due to the pandemic, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. Next slide, Bob. Items to be presented. So we're going to talk first about the summary of the revisions from the preliminary presentation that was done in December, and then some revised building level budgets, the operating and capital, and then some revenue budgets, minimum local contributions, and some assessment data. When we were looking at this budget, there were some assumptions and risks that we had to make. And the first one was that we will be full in learning mode in the 21-22 school year. We fully anticipate this happening, and without any tragedies or anything crazy happens, we'll actually be in this spring, sooner than later. But we do anticipate there's going to be some potential reopening challenges, well, these are the ones we anticipate, and those will be related to mostly instruction and assessment. I talked last year about things like the COVID slide. Those didn't happen to the degree we thought they would happen, but we have some testing coming up, and we plan on doing a few things in the summer also, but we fully expect due to this need to address some learning deficits and some social emotional deficits as we start the year up. And one of the ways we're going to fund this is using the ESSA 2 money. So if you look down, I'm going to skip down to bullet point 4 for a second, because they sort of go together. It says funds available to the district to supplement operating budget and address additional needs related to COVID-19 impact on learning, instruction, and operations. So ESSA, there was an ESSA 1, so that's, if you probably know, but it stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. It was under the CARES Act. And there is a fairly broad use of the ESSA funds. But whereas the ESSA 1 was focused on things like preventing and responding to COVID, ESSA 2 is really focused on things like learning loss, prepping to open the schools up, and things like testing. We can also use the ESSA 2 funds for things like repair to ventilation system. We've done much of that this year. And it was covered under the ESSA 1 also. So if you look at bullet 4, we were deliberate in putting in the word supplement. And part of the reason, Bob will go into this a little more later, but part of the reason this is an assumption and a risk is that the ESSA 2 has a piece of it. There's a piece of ESSA 2 that allows municipalities to essentially supplant part of their assessment using these ESSA 2 funds. And it can create some problems down the road, not the least of which is potential deficits when they go to look at planning for their subsequent fiscal year assessments. So again, we're planning on using 100% of our ESSA 2 money for student needs. And Bob will be talking more about ESSA 2 towards the end of this presentation. But if we will go back to bullet 2, Bob, do you want to take that?
Sure. So another assumption we've made is that we'll be able to successfully refinance our Tahanto building bond. It's scheduled to, it has a provision where we're able to call the bond and refinance this year. So this should happen in April of 2021. We're currently working with bond counsel on this. It's a very favorable interest rate environment. We expect that we'll be able to generate some significant savings. I expect it's going to be over $1 million over 10 years for the two towns in total. So we've baked that into our assumptions. I'll talk a little bit about that more when I talk about the capital assessments. Second assumption we've made is that we're going to be able to modify our healthcare plan design. We've made a proposal to, the administration's made a proposal to our insurance advisory committee. This is subject to the union and school committee approval. What we've proposed is that we transition to a deductible plan with a low deductible, kind of on the low end of deductible plans. It's not a high deductible plan. In order to kind of minimize the impact to employees, we're also proposing to have an employee-funded flexible spending plan administered by a third party so that some of the costs for deductible or other healthcare costs can be taken out pre-tax, and those tax savings can help offset the cost of a deductible. So that's another assumption we've made, and that's, again, as I mentioned, in progress. It's been presented, and we'll have continued discussions on that. So this slide is a summary of what's changed since our last presentation. So at the top, we have each of the 3 schools and the total. The first adjustment we made was to add in the costs for the Worcester Regional Retirement staff at Berlin Memorial and Boylston Elementary. These costs used to be in the town budgets. It's the paraprofessionals, the custodians, and cafeteria staff. Teachers are not part of this. Teachers is a self-funded MTRS plan. The information from Worcester Regional was not available at the time of our preliminary presentation. We just received it a couple weeks ago, and I've added that in to the preliminary budgets. And I would kind of also note that, this is a budget transfer. It's not an addition to our budget, and we'll be reflecting that way when you see it in the cost comparisons later. The other adjustments we made, the first item is the healthcare plan design change. So the impact there is shown for each school on changing to the deductible plan we proposed. We had the next line is a decrease of one person enrolling in the healthcare plan. The number of participants has changed, so that was adjusted as well. We had, since our preliminary presentation, we've had 3 retirement notices at Boylston Elementary. And these are staff that are enrolled in HMO plans, 2 family, 1 individual. They're not, the staff's not yet at the age where they'd go to a Medicare supplement plan. So they'd still be enrolled in the district's HMO plan, but at a lower 50% share we'd be paying instead of 75. So that's been added to Boylston. At the same time, we've factored in some adjustments to teacher pay and staff at Boylston, knowing that we expect to replace a couple of those with lower cost, people lower on the salary step and lane scale. And there's other small adjustments to pay at all 3 schools. I don't know that all of, I don't want to get into individual positions because not everything's been announced, but we factored in those some of those salary savings from retirements into our revised budget. With the Worcester Regional retirement numbers, my number for Tahanto I did have in the first budget, and we got a revised estimate when the official numbers became available, so that was reduced to bring it into what will actually be billed. We identified some minor savings in maintenance and utilities, looking at what we've been spending this year, and factored those in. And lastly, for special education, we have a likely residential placement. It's not 100% certain, but it's very likely. And so we've kind of hedged the cost a bit and reduced what we've set aside for it, recognizing that we're going to need to make that up if if the costs are incurred as inspected. And the way we would make it up are a couple ways. We'd look to utilize our IDA special ed grant to the extent we can. Although a lot of those funds are spoken for, we would potentially look to use any savings we have in this year's budget to prepay $55,000 worth of tuitions, or we would access circuit breaker current year revenue, which we don't typically do, but we're allowed to do. Again, so we were a little bit aggressive here, realizing we wanted to kind of reach the target that was set for us. But we also have plans to address this if we need to. So all in all, you can see the total reductions we identified were just under 280,000, and in our revised school budgets are shown as well. So next, I'm going to go through and look at a building by building summary. So for Berlin Memorial School, you can see the numbers in blue are the ones that are being compared. I've showed, just so people can follow, I've showed the FY21 budget being adjusted by the budget transfer for Worcester Regional retirement costs at the elementary school. So comparing the restated 21 budget, in the 22 budget, we have an increase of 93,500, which is 2.4%. So what makes that up is these are the key drivers. Excuse me. We have 58,000 for 2 FT increase in special ed paraprofessional costs and staffing. And that also includes some contractual increases for existing paraprofessional staff. We have a $53,000 increase in teacher union salaries. Those are contractual increases, include steps and lanes. There's a $13,000 increase from the conversion of the elementary special ed coordinator position to full-time. It's currently half-time. Karen, I'm going to ask Karen Molnar to briefly, after I finish this slide, to touch base on the two special ed items here. So I'm not going to go over that too far right now. We have a $39,000 reduction in the healthcare insurance costs due to lower anticipated enrollment. And we had a retirement in the custodial team on the night shift last year, and we outsourced that to a company, and we're saving $9,000. We've saved $9,000 from doing that, and we're reflecting it in this year's budget. Karen, could I ask you to just provide some context on the increased needs in special education?
Sure, we have some additional paraprofessionals. Berlin has seen some increase in their pre-K numbers this year and some increase in some special ed numbers. Some due to building in town, but other issues as well. And so that's where the need for the additional paraprofessionals come. We have some students that really need some intensive services. And then our special ed coordinator, we had cut it to a half-time position a few years back as a cost-saving measure. We've really struggled with trying to provide enough services with that as half-time. And each year of the last couple of years, we found money in the grant to increase it a little bit, but we really need to bring it back to full-time so that parents can have the support that they need and that staff have somebody in the building with them a little more often. Currently, she's in each elementary school only 1 day a week, which is tough. And then through grants, we've been able to hire her for a few extra days here and there as needed, but it's definitely something that's been really needed this year.
Thanks, Karen. And as Karen mentioned, this is a position that's split across the two elementary schools. So it's moving it to half-time at each elementary school. For capital requests for Berlin, there's currently a facilities assessment project that's underway with a firm that we selected, Habib & Associates. We expect that they may identify some needs, some repairs, some capital items that need to be done. We've listed it right now as a placeholder. We will, as we get their information, update this. If they don't have anything that's needed this year, next year, FY22, we'll withdraw it. But I felt like for planning purposes, we probably should anticipate, if we're looking at the whole building, there may be some needs. I know we've had some things happen with the septic this past year that the building's at that age where things happen, and we'd rather not wait for something to break to replace it and have to close the school for a day. The next item is an electronic sign at the school. This includes the cost of the sign, plus we're estimating some costs for electrical connection to the school. The sign would be near the road, and to kind of provide some current information on things going on at the school as people are traveling to and from the school. And the last item is something we had on the budget last year. We withdrew for a year, and we put back for FY22 is to do some asphalt repairs and restriping of the parking lot. In total, it's $68,000. Next is the Boylston Elementary budget. So in blue again is the numbers that are being compared. The FY22 figure of $4,325,000 versus just over $4.2 million. The restated budget, again, there's a transfer of Worcester Regional retirement costs. It's an increase in this is an increase of just under $125,000 or 3% on the Boylston Elementary budget. The key drivers are the first part is we did have a couple additional enrollments in the healthcare plan. So that was 59,000. Actually, that was 3 additional enrollments. And that's the biggest driver. We have some retirees, that's 32,000. The teacher union salary increases actually would be more, but it's offset by the fact that we factored in some salary savings on replacement hires. We're also seeing the special ed costs in the medical therapeutical services that are needed, and that's 19,000 that we needed to add to the budget to meet student needs. The 16,000 for technology replacement provides us with the capacity to replace Chromebooks in existing technology. We have basically outfitted each grade with a set of Chromebooks. We don't have the budget capacity to replace them. So this will give us the capacity on a going forward basis to replace about a grade of Chromebooks a year. The elementary special ed coordinator position, this is the same thing as in the Berlin budget. This is the Boylston share of that. And some good news on the special education front. We did have a decrease in transportation costs associated with special education and foster transportation students of 53,000, which is offsetting some of these increases. For capital items, we have a very old phone system that is not we can't get a vendor to sign a maintenance contract with us. We have issues. It's hard to get somebody in. It's well past its useful life, so we've kind of put this off a bit, but we felt like we're at a point where we can't put this off any further. We also have money to, with the help of the highway department and police department and others, we're able to create a temporary driver rate for pickup and drop off this year. The Principal Thompson and his team have said that it's worked much better for traffic flow, and they want it to be a kind of the permanent traffic flow for the building for pickup and drop off in the future. So we're putting in money in the budget to put more of a permanent paving there instead of the temporary stuff that was put down. The total there is 65,000. Next is the Tahanto budget. And we don't need to do the adjustment for Worcester Regional because we've been getting the assessment for Tahanto in the past. There's no transfer of elementary employees there. The increase at Tahanto was 396,000 or 4.3%. The year-over-year changes are the largest items shown here. We have 170,000 due to increases in teacher union salaries. These include all union positions, not just the classroom teachers, the special ed teachers, it's the specialists, it's the school psychologist, the nurse, and other union positions. The increase in special ed tuitions is again for there's kind of a few changes, but the primary driver of this is an anticipated likely placement at a residential private school. And there's also an $88,000 increase in transportation costs. Most of that is special ed based on where students are traveling to into their placements. And again, here we have the similar increase in medical and therapeutical service needs of 16,000. And these are being offset by a reduction in health insurance costs. There is a lower participation than we had planned and budgeted for last year. For Tahanto Capital, the screen shows the total. This is a reduction of 126,000 from the last fiscal year, and this is assuming a successful refinancing of the Tahanto building project. For planning purposes, I asked the bond counsel for 2 sets of numbers, and I'm using the interest rate assumption that's 0.5% above current market conditions. The reason I'm doing that is it's illegal to overspend a budget, and I wanted to make sure that we had a number that we weren't going to exceed. And if I get the information later before the town meetings, we're certainly willing to and will reduce the budget further. I think it could potentially be, if we got, if market conditions stay the same, we could potentially get another 40,000 in savings spread across the assessments to the two towns. But I think this 126,000 does help offset some of the operating budget increases. And again, over 10 years, this is, I'll share a schedule when we get the official figures, but I think it's going to be in the range of 1.2 to 1.5 million in savings over 10 years. This is a district operating budget summary, high level view, and operating budget, just to remind folks, is just their expenditures. This is not the assessments to the towns. So this is kind of showing the figures that we presented in previous slides all in one place. And you can see we're 3.6 across all three schools. Tahanto's 4.3 and Boylston and Berlin. Not really going to go over this. We typically have shared this in the past. It's there for your reading when you have a chance, but it breaks out the spending of the district by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed function categories. And if you look at all of them, there's really not much change year over year. So I don't really think there's much to say about the slide. A slight decline in the fixed charges for benefits. And those are the categories if you're wondering what's in each group on the previous slide. This is a reminder, we presented this at the preliminary presentation. Just a reminder that, while COVID's going on, it's having an impact on our revolving funds. Particularly I'd point out the school lunch. We're going to be substantially drawing down that balance. We have staff that needs to be there and put things in. We're spending additional money for containers. Everything has to go in a disposable container. We're not allowed to kind of put it on a plate and a tray like we used to. Takes staff time to do that. We have the same amount of staff, minus 1 or 2 positions. So nearly the same amount of staff. We're paying for additional materials costs, and we have 50% of the students there. So we're taking in less revenue. So by the end of this year, we're going to have drawn down most of the healthy kind of operating surplus or cushion we've had in the school lunch account. And also in school choice in Boylston and Tahanto, to an extent, we're drawing that down by using it. Over time, we're going to have to, again, bring the school choice money, the revenue we're taking in, we're going to have to align that with the amount we're spending in our budget. And you can see in total, we anticipate on the far right going from about 2.5 to 1.7 in revolving fund balances. And we are in a difficult time. We recognize sometimes you need to access some of these fund balances when it's a difficult time. So I wouldn't say we're too concerned about it, but we're certainly aware of it and trying to plan to manage it back to where it's stays in a healthy place. It's a high-level summary of how much our projected spendings to increase. In the blue here is our general fund operating budget that we presented, and the orange is the revolving funds on the previous slide. So you can see we budgeted an increase in the general fund, and the revolving fund we anticipate spending a little bit less. So these past slides have been related to spending. I wanted to talk about revenues and aid. From a revenue and state aid standpoint, our state aid revenues are very flat. We're not seeing an uptick with the Student Opportunity Act like a lot of towns across the state. We're not comprised of a high percentage of low income or English language learners, where you get, those are some of the towns that have received more funding, the special increments for those students that have helped those districts. We've stayed very flat, as you'll see on our revenue projection. And really, so if you look at our revenues, a $720 projected increase, we're really, the increase in our budget's being funded by the town assessments. The state aid isn't really helping. aside from the grants that they're providing to help. Another factor I wanted to share was the Tahanto. Before we get to the assessments, is to show the Tahanto enrollment by town. You can see on the top the Boylston figures. I don't think the legend shows the orange is Boylston, blue is Berlin. So this is the first year in a while we've seen a shift where Berlin's gone up by 3 and Boylston's gone down by 9, and this has impacted the town assessments. It's the first year in a while where we've seen the percentage increase for Berlin of Tahanto's budget higher than Boylston's. So for assessments, looking at all items, on the left-hand side, we show the Berlin Memorial operating budget. The second item is the Tahanto operating budget. The third line's Berlin Memorial Capital, and then Tahanto Capital. We've restated the assessment for the operating budget to reflect the Worcester regional transfer. In yellow, I've highlighted the bottom line total, which is probably what the FinComs and town select boards are most interested in. It's a 2.6% increase for the town of Berlin across all categories. And Jeff and I were talking about this, and I wanted to kind of keep this in front of us as we were doing our budget. We had been provided some feedback. The range would be ideally 2.5 is what people would preferably 2.5, and potentially up to 300%. So we've shown what our difference is versus getting to the 2.5%. We'd have to cut another 7,325 to get to 2.5%, and we're under 3% by 25,952. So that just kind of puts some context around where we are relative to what the town was asking. For Boylston, again, we've shown the Worcester regional restatement. In total, Boylston comes out to a 2.9% increase. This does not include the vocational assessments, which I'll show on the next slide, which are similar to this. To get to 2.5%, we'd need to cut another approximately 41,000, and we're under 3% by about 9,000. And the vocational increase is 2.6%. We don't know how many students are going to get accepted. Boylston's not a member of Assabet like Berlin is, so there's a lot of interest in tuition paying towns for students attending, and Assabet last year admitted less than they typically do. We're not sure what the case will be. If we get notice, it's typically not for a little bit. An adjustment could be made, but we felt like assuming 7 out of 11 are accepted would be kind of in line with the trend in the past, maybe a little bit less than previous years, kind of weighing last year a little bit. So there's some opportunity for that to potentially improve. There is some risk that more students get accepted. So that's our budget recommendations to the town on vocational. So I have a couple other things I just wanted to make the committee and others aware of. So we've shown the budget figures. We were notified that by our health insurer that there'd be a 1-month premium holiday in fiscal year 22. I would imagine that the towns of Berlin and Boylston probably have the same thing. I believe they have the same insurer. But if we were to budget that savings, we'd have an 8.25 or 8.33%, basically 1 month's increase the following year. So we'd be going into the budget knowing we have a sizable increase, and it's basically creating a budget deficit going into the following year. What we propose to do is to reallocate these funds and put the savings towards a special ed reserve, which the school committee voted for and the towns approved 2 years ago. That will also help us with kind of the reduction we made of 55,000 for special ed in case that does go out, which we expect it will. we potentially could draw from the special ed reserve if we're not comfortable using circuit breaker. And the remainder we would propose to put to the OPEB trust fund. This is for other post-employment benefits, essentially retiree healthcare. We've just started funding this. We're less than 1% funded. You know, a lot of districts are in the same boat we are, but this is an opportunity to put some money aside for it. I think the target we should be shooting for over the next 20 years is to get it to $6 million. You know, you potentially don't need to get it fully funded, but I think we need to take advantage of this opportunity and set some money aside for it. We, however, have not reflected these in the budget right now. We want to wait on ratification of the healthcare plan design changes to confirm the amount available we have. What our rate, we'll know then what our rates are for the month. And we would, at a future school committee meeting, propose just a shift out of the healthcare insurance line to cover the special ed reserve contribution and the OPEB trust contribution. And then the following year, we wouldn't make those contributions. Instead, it would go back into the healthcare line. So we'd have a stable FY22, but going into FY23, we won't have to make up those costs. We'll just won't make the contributions to those reserve funds. The other consideration is, you know, we just wanted to be upfront about this. I know, you know, towns are, well, I've talked to peers and cohorts. They don't really know what to do. I just want to clearly put it, you know, out there and talk about it. And, you know, the towns do have the opportunity to apply 75% of ESSER II funds to fulfill part of their minimum local contribution to the regional district budget. What that would, in essence, do is it would replace part of their assessment. And if it replaced part of their assessment's covering things in our budget. So 75% of 127,000 is about 100,000 for the sake of round numbers. So about 100,000 of our operating budget would be covered by the ESSER II if the towns availed themselves of this option. And then the following year, this grant won't be there and there'll be a $100,000 budget increase. So that's one reason why we would recommend not doing it. The other is that we feel that there are going to be significant supplemental needs for students. We see these funds as a way to address some of those student needs, whether it's social emotional support, whether it's tutoring to you know, address learning loss. There are potentially some operating expenses we might need as well. So the district's seeking to use and access 100% of the ESSER II funds. And we hope our, you know, our budget, our year-over-year increases, you know, will enable the towns to support this. We're welcome to hear their thoughts and feedback. It's ultimately the town decision, and we recognize and respect that. We would potentially, you know, advocate for if the town, you know, thought that this was something they wanted to pursue, is maybe we seek to achieve a similar reduction, but still get access to the ESSER II funds. And so, you know, we'll see what the town feedback is here. We really think that it's in the best interest of students for this money to be available to the district in full. And again, we wanted to hear back from the towns, and we also wanted to make sure that, you know, this is what we've kind of gotten as an understanding of it, that, you know, they had the same understanding. That's it for ESSER II. So at this point, I don't know if Jeff, you have anything else you want to add. We're open to questions. I'd also note, you know, there were some supporting slides that the school committee members wanted to get into the details of the assessment calculation that are there. You know, that's our presentation, and you know, we're happy to field any questions.
Are there any questions from school committee members at this time?
I have one question. Bob, excellent job. Any questions I had while looking at this ahead of time, you answered so well in your presentation. The only part you lost me on was the holiday for the health insurance. Does that mean like what they're giving us 1 month free
Yes.
this year and we don't have to pay it back next year, or we do have to pay it
Yeah,
back?
it's 1 month free for us and for employees. Basically, it's a free
Okay.
month of premiums.
Okay, well, okay, thank you.
Bob, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to me the school choice expense and revenue numbers that you put up there?
Sure. So the numbers in the budget, the revenue reflects the number of school choice students attending our schools. And we get 5,000 per student. And in some cases, we get a supplement for special ed students. And the expense, and all that money goes into a school choice revolving fund. And the expense is how much we're using out of that revolving fund from the revenue we're getting. So you can see from the numbers we've built up a little bit over the years, and we're drawing it down at a little bit more of a rate than we're taking it in at. We're doing that, knowingly and consciously, thinking that, we have some reserves there and we can draw it down. But that's what that is. The expense is really just covering part of our operating budget. It's from the money we get from those students.
Okay.
And you didn't ask this, but we also pay school choice tuition. That's not shown there. That's a separate line item that comes out of our operating budget.
That is
so-
actually what I was talking about. I didn't explain that well. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my question about the tuition that we pay versus what we receive.
We do. I will comment though, we're in pretty good shape. As districts go, we have more people that come here than are interested in going to other districts. So we're in good shape. Districts that don't have that have budget problems.
Hey, Bob, that 11 number for applications to Assabet, that's an accurate number. That's because I know it's closed, so that's an accurate number in terms of the number of applicants we had for this upcoming year.
That's as of like 5 days ago from the guidance office at Tahanto.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible somebody didn't notify them. They usually get pretty good, based on prior years. They were pretty close. The part that I will say we estimate on is the risk is the number of acceptances. That could go higher, that could go lower. And we're not going to know that for a while.
And remind me, I know we talked about this last year, remind me what that dollar amount is per student in terms of how that affects the budget perspective?
Sure, it's, let's see, I have it in my notes here. 16, the assumption, they don't,
Okay, 16.
16,825. That's an estimate. It's not ratified by the state yet.
Okay.
And Bob, you said you're not going to know for a while. Like, what's a while? Like April, May, July? When do the kids here?
I don't remember, to be honest. I think
Oh, okay.
Diane might know, but I think it's probably more like April.
Okay.
Yeah, we usually find out the end of April, beginning of May. They do have a new automated system, so I don't know if they're doing it more of a rolling type of admission. But it's usually late April, beginning of May. But students really at any time can rescind their acceptance. And students maybe that initially do not get chosen can also be taken off of a wait list.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And just as a reminder to the Boylston school community members in the town, the vocational numbers include not just Assabet, but there's a student attending Norfolk Agricultural, and I think the other one is Minuteman. So there's 2 students attending other schools that we pay for those costs as well.
Bob, I know we don't find out till typically around the October timeframe when the governor talks about his 9C cuts. Is there any speculation on anything coming down the line? I know because from a revenue perspective, he's been talking about it from a low perspective. So anything?
For schools, I mean, the numbers for this year are settled. For FY22, the governor's budget didn't, I budgeted the exact number that for guidance that we received. I don't foresee a 9C cut. I think they've kind of signaled that they would try to level fund Chapter 70 at a minimum. We're not getting increases. Towns that the towns that might be more likely to be affected, Jim, are towns that we're going to get additional money because of the Student Opportunity Act, and they probably would defer that. Phasing in the Student Opportunity Act over 7 years, they probably defer some of that and have it happen later. We're not going to get any more money out of that, so I think we're less likely to be affected. I can't say for certain, but the 9C cuts would be drastic, I haven't heard at the school Chapter 70 level that would happen. I don't know, I obviously can't speak for the towns, whether that was mentioned to the towns.
I know we usually don't talk about this till later on, but no, never mind. That was going to ask different. I think I already know the answer to the question, so I won't ask it. Okay.
There's no such thing as a bad question, Jim.
Well, I was just.
Is that what teachers say? Someone else in the class might have the same question.
Well, I just was forecasting if we're going to have anything in E&D at the end of the year, but I'm guessing not much, correct?
We got our E&D certified. I believe I think it's about, I don't have the exact number from you, but I think it's about 400,000.
Okay.
We've planned to use, let me find it. So here on the state aid and revenue slide, I kind of went over this pretty quick, but we're planning to use 60,000 of it in our budget this year. Oh, I'm not, am I sharing my screen still?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're planning to use 60,000 of it in FY22. We did have an increase last year. We had some savings, and
So
I think,
no, you answered my question. Sorry, no, go ahead. Finish your thought.
we've had some favorable revenues in prior years that have helped build up the E&D. I think we budgeted in a way where we're not going to see favorable revenues this year. We had some one-time revenues. So, we're going to be drawing down our E&D by 60,000. One of the things we thought about is there a way to potentially use more? I think we felt like, it would be more important to kind of identify cuts in the budget and not kind of create a reliance on using E&D and school choice to balance the budget. So that's why we kind of focused on cuts versus using kind of reserves.
Yeah, I think so. One other thing I wanted to touch on is a question I had was, I talk about this a lot, right? We're a small school district, right? So small things can impact us in large ways, right? And we typically, as we get closer to approving and voting on the final budget, there's certain things that swing us sometimes, right? The folks that get into ASABET, right, and that number that can sway us a bit. We talk about out of district placements that come in, right, maybe with special need requirements. I don't know if Karen or Carol can speak to it, but with the pandemic and everything and kind of our goals are related, do we foresee any increase in SPED moving forward in terms of number of students who might require special education services, number of students who might look to school choice in with special education needs? Because that's an area that can impact us, greatly, right? So I don't know if they can speak to in terms of, what we might be expecting from that perspective, or if it's just, from we see it as sort of just standard increases.
So it's a good question, Jim. We always try to forecast as much as we can as far as preschool, which is another one of those numbers that we never know for sure how many kids will be coming in at 3 and 4 years old. And then looking at the building in town and how much that's impacting us. So we try and forecast for what we expect, but every year other ones come in from another state or something that we'll have to take on the responsibility for right away. And one tuition can really throw the budget off quite a bit.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, or was there more?
It does, as from a process perspective relation. Really what I'm trying to get my mind around, and maybe it's a conversation for a different time as we focus on, budget today, but do we expect to see an increase in students requiring special education services, meaning an increase from the pandemic, from the loss of education, from social emotional, any of the scientific educational things that we've talked about or folks talking about? Do we anticipate any increased requirements to, students who may not require special education services today, but might next year when they come back because of the way this year went? Anything like that is really
Yeah. So we're really trying to evaluate students based on whether there's a disability or whether they are missing some services and they need some recovery services. So they've done a great job in each of the schools of building some recovery services in for all of the students. And I think that's helping us. Do I think there'll be an increase in special ed needs? I do. I think a lot of it may be in the mental health area. I think there are students that are struggling, but to quantify that would be impossible at this point. I know that there has not been a huge increase this year at all. The students that they're working with, they've gotten supports in place, but that doesn't mean it's a special education issue. It may be other issues as well. But we have the psychologists working with them. We have teachers working with them. Diane has a built-in period for all kids to have support during the day. The elementary schools also have some built-in support. So some of that is really taking a proactive approach to this. So we're hoping that it's not going to increase our numbers significantly.
And we wouldn't expect to see a correlation between pandemic and special education. Those kind of disabilities wouldn't be what you would expect because of the pandemic. We'd see losses just because, there was a break in instruction or something like that, but you wouldn't get an additional disability because of that. You wouldn't pick that up. So you wouldn't translate into a special education issue.
Jim, thanks for asking that question. It kind of jogs my memory of a question. There's a lot of talk going around about people looking into more private schools. Does that affect us if we have a higher than usual number of kids who leave for a private school? Does that affect
Not for a private school. There's the student. We don't incur any additional charge for the private school. Obviously, we want students to want to go to our schools, but financially, there's no impact of somebody going to a private school. I guess in theory,
do we lose any aid or any money or anything? How does that work?
Well, what about Title I funding? If the shifting of the community and the number of students in the schools and sort of how that, I always get confused trying to explain Title I, but I know that numbers can change that. What about from that perspective?
Title I's based on school age children in the town. It doesn't matter what school they go to. And we're also supposed to look at offering some money to private schools if we have Title I or low-income students going to private schools. Often though, the private schools are people who have the means to afford them, and they're not Title I students eligible for Title I services. If somebody elects to go to a charter school, we have to pay a tuition like AMSA, or if they like to go to a school choice to another district, that's less expensive. That's $5,000. We would incur a fee as well. Our state aid gets affected in theory, but in practice, there's a minimum aid increase. So, we could, we wouldn't see it. We wouldn't really see much of an impact at all from, a few students going to a private school on our revenues.
Is there any sense that because of, like Jim's question, because of the pandemic and the way things have gone, is there any sense that there might be more than just a few?
I think that the principals would be more, I guess, aware. I think they might have some information at the high school level of people looking at schools. And I think, at ninth grade, that might not be uncommon. The elementary schools, we don't see it much, but, I think I would defer to the principals to answer that question.
Currently at the middle high school, again, with the information that we have, these numbers come from people that have asked for our counseling department to fill out recommendations for them. Currently, we're seeing a decline in the number of students that are asking for recommendations for private schools.
Okay, good.
I can't project for next year, but I can say, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but this year we had a few students move to private schools. We had a few more return from private schools to join our hybrid model or our remote model. So I would say it's probably a net wash for us at this point. I have no way of projecting for next year.
The same thing for Berlin. It's hard to tell. We rarely see kids leave our school system for private schools unless there's a religious factor, someone going to St. Bernadette's, for example.
I have another question unless another committee member has another question. I don't want to hog all the questions. It's hard to see everybody. But beginning of into this year, we negotiated as part of a group of districts, I think, but we negotiated on our own for a bit of a cost reduction or savings from the end of last year to this year as it relates to the busing.
Yes.
Let's assume, again, not the topic that we're talking about budget tonight, so I want to keep it on intact. The assumption that we're back full time next year, beginning of the year, is there any the busing companies have had a lot of challenges, right? There's a number of challenges from just financially, staffing, resources, going to be a requirement for more busing, X, Y, and Z. Do we forecast any increase in busing costs?
We have a contract for 5 years. We've basically forecast the contractual increase. And the new rules allow, there's the recent guidance that just came out is revised. It allows, no capacity restrictions on buses for elementary students, and for high school students, unless you're a community with high prevalence, then in that case, you'd have a limitation of 2 per seat, which would be 50 on our buses. And if we're not a community of high prevalence, which, we are thinking and expecting we're not going to be a community of high prevalence next fall, that we'd be able to have, you can put 3 for a seat as well. Our ridership levels, most of our buses are below 50, so we wouldn't need to do anything. During normal times, like especially between sports seasons, we might have more than 50 riders in a few Tahanto buses. And that would be the only challenge. But if we're not a community of high prevalence, we could do some of those 3 per seat, like the middle school kids, we'd have sit at the front. So I don't think we would need an additional bus. What we potentially might need to do is rebalance or adjust a route for the time between sports seasons. Like if I see that bus number 2 in Berlin for Tahanto has 53 kids and bus number 1 has 44, we might have to try to shift some from one bus to the other. We don't have an average of 50 per bus. So I'm pretty confident we're not going to need to do that absent a really, return to COVID type environment. Assuming we're heading back to vaccinations, people being, we're not in a COVID environment next year, and we can seat people on buses like and follow this new guidance, there's no reason we should need an additional bus. So that was a long answer for your short question.
That's all right. Nope, that's what I was looking for. I mean, I'm just trying to anticipate. I'll let you know where my questions are coming from. Is we went to our communities last year in conjunction with the administration, right? And we asked for some pretty significant budget increases, right? Especially Boylston, maybe more than Berlin last year, but we asked for some significant increases for a number of reasons, right? And we worked with the towns to accomplish that goal, right? With the understanding that we would, and again, we didn't know about the pandemic, but with the understanding that we would aim for a level set, right, budgets for this year, right? And I think you've done a great job doing that. So really what my questions are from around the idea of thinking about the things that could pop up and impact that where we're starting to not have that conversation, right? Where we're going to be asked by the communities to keep that in line and just making sure that we're planning for those items that could potentially impact us to a point where now we're having conversations with the communities about not being able to target the level set, right? So, and that's what I want to avoid. Again, I know we can't use the excuse that there's a pandemic because the towns are working through their challenges and their financial challenges because of the pandemic and those things as well, right? So everybody's affected by it, not just the schools. So that's just a little background of where some of my questions are coming from. Just
yeah,
Mike.
I understand. And we've had that conversation here about like, well, if something, if there are issues, that is part of the reason why we, we've requested access in full to the ESSER 2 funds. It does provide a safety net. It might not be, it very well could be used, not for a safety net. It could be used we could consume it for tutoring costs, throughout the year to help students catch up. It could be consumed on other things, but it's also, potentially something that helps support needs that we haven't identified yet.
And I don't want to forget either that we had goals as a committee and with the administration, right? They weren't official goals, but we wanted to build the special education fund, right? That we approved in the towns 2 years ago. We wanted to stop relying on school choice funds as much as we were and balance some of that stuff, right? So I understand we're working through pandemic, but these are goals that we had and we want to try to get back to those, right? So it's not, we don't want to forget about that stuff as well either.
Right.
We can't just, I know we're dealing with the challenges of today, but we have to remember the challenges of tomorrow as well. So that's just kind of where my head's at.
I kind of want to add a point to that, Jim, following what you said about the pandemic and asking the communities for whatever we're asking for them, large increases, 2.6, 3.0, 4.3, whatever they are. Given the economy this past year, the pandemic, people losing jobs, working less, I don't know any families that have a 4% increase in their budget this year. It is a lot. Bob, I know I asked the town earlier a few weeks ago. There's nothing in this budget to help the parents who have effectively subsidized the budget this past year for the remote learning. Parents are spending, thousands of dollars to get help during these remote periods. There's nothing in here. There's no way that we can do anything to help them.
We can't legally do anything like that, Mike. I mean, we're just not allowed to.
So effectively, we're asking the parents to subsidize the budget with private money for their public education. It just seems wrong to then, on top of that, we're looking at 4% increases at Tahanto and 3% and 2.6%. It seems like a lot.
Right. Well, I mean, we're legally mandated to meet IEP needs, and that's driving the Tahanto piece. The increases for Boylston and Berlin are less than 3%. And the assessment impact is 2.6 and 2.9. So I mean, that's the piece that
Yeah,
goes
just
to
the
the
past year with
taxpayer.
COVID, I mean, a 2.6% increase for someone at work would be like winning the lottery these days. I mean, it's just a lot. That's all I have to say, you know?
No, I understand. I mean, I think and we've done things that, the healthcare plan design, me, we're a lot of us are participants on that plan, teachers. I mean, that's if people use that full family deductible, that's $900 that they're just coming out of people's pockets in the district. And so we've made some difficult decisions. We picked the healthcare plan design because we felt that it affected all employee groups, not just the teachers union, not just paraprofessionals, not just the administration. It kind of goes across all groups. So we picked something that we thought was equitable. But if you look at the things that are increasing our budget, most of them are either contractual or, meeting students' needs related to special education. And, those are the students we feel like, those are students you need to support during this time and give them support when they need it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying don't support the students, but like I spoke to someone today because I think on average we're like 4 days a week remote or something like that, or we're less than 2 in school right now on average. I don't know, you probably have the exact number, but I spoke with someone today. They spend like $150 a week on outside help coming in. I know I've personally spent a couple $1,000s on some help during the remote days. There are parents who've reached out to us who they don't have the luxury of being able to work at home for these remote days. They've had to hire or send kids out somewhere. That's a significant hit to them. And then on top of that, we're asking to raise their taxes again through assessments and all that. Just, I don't know. It seems like a lot this year. It's not quite fair to what the parents have had to put up with this year.
Mike, I wouldn't, yeah, I'll add something to that. I don't disagree with the overall sentiment of what you're saying, right? I hear some of the same things, and you got to remember too, there's a lot of things happening where the education system, the districts aren't being supported by our state government, right? So it's not necessarily just saying, hey, what can our local school district? I mean, a level set budget is a fairly, the goal is from that perspective. I wonder if that percentage, how that affects into other things in the community that are the other parts of the town that are going to overall affect an individual who lives in that community's tax rate, right? I'm guessing maybe it's not as much, right? But there's other ways for parents to as well impact that, and it goes to a lot of things, right? We're not necessarily going to our state government. We're being asked to do a lot of things and not provided a lot of resources from state resources to help doing some of these things, right? So, so I agree with you totally on the sentiment. I don't know that it all boils down to this particular, but I get it. And I don't disagree with your statement. I would just encourage parents to look for alternative ways to help and request and talk to people, through you, like this resource, talking to us and making this point known. I think it's an excellent point to be known. But I think there's other ways that we need to be encouraging community members to go fight for this stuff too, right? And that's a help to us, right? Because I think we need to be doing it as well.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think I saw someone from the community yelling at the governor online today. Actually, that was pretty good.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think there's a lot of people who yell at the governor, but okay. Any other questions from committee members? I've been watching our attendee list, and I haven't seen a hand go up. So I don't know if that means you did a good job or they're just not paying attention anymore. I don't know. You gave them the old PowerPoint, sleeping pill. I don't know, but I personally think it's because you did a really good job, Bob. I think you did excellent. Like Angela mentioned, you answered a lot of my questions that I was going to ask. You answered them later on in the presentation. So, I appreciate that. I would just remind, my last comment would be, again, just reminding, the commitment we made to these communities around what we asked for last year and what we're trying to focus on this year, in case things pop up and we need to focus on that. To me, that's an important piece that we follow through with the commitment that we made to our communities. So I appreciate the job you guys are doing on focusing on that, and let's try to keep the focus there.
Yeah.
And one last thing about the $18,000 for the sign at Berlin Memorial. Is that the only school that doesn't have an electronic sign?
Tahanto has one. Boylston Elementary does not have one, right? Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we're not putting one in Boylston, but we want to put one in Berlin.
Yeah, Boylston has capital for phones. They already have capital items in there. We try not to overload the capital in a given year.
Is that something, if we had to cut something, would an electronic sign be the worst thing?
Well, there might be another administration member who feels strongly that it would be a bad thing to
I'm
cut.
sure. I don't want to lower his goalposts, but I mean, how have we communicated for the last 100 years?
I think the way I would look at it is we're going to go, Jeff and I are going to be, I think it's on Zoom with the Berlin FinCom tomorrow night, and we'll see what their feedback is.
Can the sign broadcast Zoom meetings?
I don't know if they do or not. I just know that we're on it. I'm just an attendee, so I'm just I don't know that.
Mike, I can tell you that since I've been here, you wouldn't believe the number of parents in Berlin who've asked me about putting a sign there, and I wouldn't have suspected it myself, but I checked with Mr. Campbell, and he got a number of parents who've asked him about putting a sign up. So.
Jeff got an anonymous letter a year and a half ago too, with significant complaints about the appearance of our sign, which we.
Yeah.
Mr. Thompson
just forgot about that. Yeah.
Mr. Thompson just stands outside with a bell like a town crier. And,
Oh yeah. I got a little hat too.
I've received a lot of emails since I've been here too. I was surprised, but it is a source of pride there. So.
Well, Mike, don't worry. I'm keeping my eye on this driveway as well, because there's a lot of driveways at Boylston. So.
But I think what we'll do is we'll see what the town says, and if they say we're looking for 2.5 instead of 2.6, and I think we would probably look at it as where's the best place to take the money from, and we'd want to talk to the two principals, if it's Berlin, the principal at Tahanto and the principal at Berlin Memorial, Ace and John and Diane, and get their thoughts on where we, what they'd prioritize. It might be something else in the operating budget they think's a lower priority than the sign. I don't know. I can't. We haven't got to that point yet. We usually start to have those conversations after the open budget hearing, after we get some feedback on our presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no other questions, I think that wraps up that portion of our agenda. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Jeff. Great job. Appreciate it as always. Okay. So moving at last portion of our agenda, then obviously is business items. So we will be voting to accept Bob's preliminary budget as he presented it tonight. Bob, we do this every time, and I just want to make sure we cover it. Do you require me to call the vote with it's either sometimes you ask for specific numbers, or can we just vote as presented? Because now with the district, we can just.
Yeah, I would say all your viewers probably would prefer, and we would too, to have you say as presented.
I was just going to have Angela do it if you needed it the other way. So,
but I would say if you could just say the expense budgets and the assessments as presented.
Expense budgets and which ones?
And assessments.
And assessment budgets. Okay.
I'm sorry, in expense and capital budgets and assessments.
Okay. Okay. Could I please have a motion to approve and accept the FY 2022 preliminary expense and capital and assessment budgets as presented by Bob this evening?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Keith?
I'll second it.
I think I got Keith first.
Oh, great.
Okay. Okay, roll call. Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Mike?
No,
Nay? That,
Nay.
just a nay, right?
nay.
Okay. I'm an aye as well. Okay, Christy, just for recording purposes, let's just make sure we have 4 ayes and 1 nay. Mr. Totman's nay. I'll make sure I follow up with you that we have that recorded appropriately. Okay, the next item is and I just to clarify and some kind of confusion going back and forth, and just kind of want to give everybody the background and kind of where we're at from this perspective as it relates to the resolution. So we've been working diligently on it. I should say Lori has been working more diligently on it than I, just trying to help her navigate some of the stuff. A lot of it, we were waiting for legal feedback, and not many of you know, Russ was on vacation for a little while and has been digging out of some muddy stuff. So it's been a little bit slower than typical. So where Lori and I started with this was the MASC Framingham presented resolution, as some of you may have written, or you saw the first draft that we had put in there incorrectly. That was the first draft of resolution that we went to have Russ review and approve. He came back with, I would not submit that resolution. He had a number of reasons why. One was there was just too much verbiage that could be misconstrued one way or another, or tie you into some type of commitment one way or another, and could be taken from different sides of the fence to mean one thing. Second, he wasn't completely confident that all of the information in that was accurate. And he was like, well, I think you should do some really good fact checking more on this. He was shocked that MASC was promoting it that way. So he said, either really dig into this, if this you want to do this, you're really overcomplicating what you're truly just asking for, which is to have the teachers, I am losing my mind right now, but have the teachers made a priority, right? So he said, just keep it very, very simple. So we did some research, Lori did some research, and we found the Amherst, which was basically very simple, like you see in your drive now, which is the really short paragraph, direct to the point, asking that the teachers be prioritized. And that was Russ. So that was Russ's recommendation. That's as well as what he said other districts that he represents was the recommendation he gave to those districts as well. So our goal would be so what I'm going to ask for a vote tonight is to approve that wording as it is. Then what we'll do is we'll put it on to a formalized, delivery. And we're working with Russ and some others to, the different ways to send it to the governor, legislature, commissioner. Russ suggested that we send it through MASC, ask MASC send it on our behalf as well. So a number of different categories, we're going to send it on behalf of the committee administration and the BBEA as well. And it's very, one of the things it's very direct. It doesn't, it doesn't say, it's not saying that we're not going to go. It's not tying us to going to back to school or whatnot as it relates to the thing. We're just asking for teachers to be prioritized. Is there any questions as it relates to what you've read on there and in the process that we're going to take?
The phrase "in collaboration with," have they collaborated? Are they of the same understanding that you just explained?
We have not presented it we needed to, so I was told to vote on it here first and then share it with the BBEA. But my communication with them after that topic, so I had some communication with some of the folks. Yes, I believe that is theirs, but it will be, before it goes out, it will be presented to the BBEA for their agreement before it gets sent out.
And they understand, or they will understand, that this is not us saying that until this happens, we don't want to make any changes. It's just a simple statement of support.
Yeah, correct. And it's not designed for that for one side or another, right? It's not designed for us to say we're not doing this or them to say that they want that. It's
I
purely
just want to make sure that that's clearly the understanding.
absolutely that'll be part of the discussion, and I don't expect that to be a concern from them either. But yes, to answer your question, the answer is yes. Yeah. So is everybody okay with us voting on that now, the wording as it is? Okay. All right. So could I please have a motion to approve accept the school committee resolution to Governor Baker and legislature as provided?
Moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
I got Angela. All right. Roll call. Lori,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Angela,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. Okay. Our next meeting is March 9th, where Jeff will be presenting his current back to school plan, just so everybody is aware and prepared. We will be taking of some form or fashion of a vote that evening. Okay, so it will be a presentation of a plan and an open discussion between our committee. We may take multiple votes that evening, but be prepared for open discussion and most likely some form or fashion of a vote. Everybody's good with that? Okay. All right. Well, thank you much, everybody. Thank you for having a good evening. It's 8 o'clock, which is always a good time to get done with a school committee meeting, because I'm sure the next one won't be as short. So could I please have a motion to close the Boylston Regional School Committee meeting?
So we're not going into executive session? Did I
We're
read that?
not. That was a miscommunication.
Oh, okay.
Well, I thought, I'll just be completely honest, I thought we didn't need to for a certain reason. We did not.
Okay.
And the communication was I was supposed to get back to Christy to let her know we were not. I had gotten her ready for it, but I needed to talk to Russ. And he said, we're not. And we didn't have 48 hours notice anyway, so I didn't want to get slapped in the wrist. So, but we didn't need it anyways. So yes, no executive session. Sorry for the fire drill on that one as well.
Wow, bonus. All right, I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Keith, thank you very much. Roll call. Lori,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Angela,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Thank you, everybody.